Come and bask in the warm, glowing, warming glow. Hello and welcome back. It's Emmy the Cat Lady here, just outside Vault 87 in the Capital Wasteland, which is a wee bit radioactive, just a tiny bit, as you can see in the corner of the screen. I have God mode on, so if I didn't, then I would have already been dead before I got my first word finished. Today we're talking about Vault 87, which is an important vault and part of the main quest of Fallout 3. So normally you can't really access this area unless you have a radiation suit and use a ton of Radaway and Rad-X, but even for this scientist here that wasn't enough. You can see they've dropped some Rad-X and some Radaway and they're wearing a radiation suit, so even with all that radiation protection it didn't really work well for them, unfortunately. I think it's a she. And you can see there's some skeletons as well. So the reason for this is that the vault external door took a direct hit, which is mentioned in some cut content from this vault on the Overseer's terminal, but we'll talk about that more later on. So this vault was built, we can't go through that door either, so this vault was built in 2066 and finished in 2071. And it did have a bunch of kind of non-standard equipment included, which was 4 stasis chambers, a plasma containment field, 6 food processing stations, and a GECK, which is, of course, the reason that you have to go there during the course of the story of Fallout 3. So I'll show you quickly on the map. So we've discovered Vault 87, which is kind of hard to get. You can get it from the internal side of the door, and that gives you the location rather than coming to the radioactive mess that's there. But normally we go through Little Lamplight, which I'm gonna walk around to because even though I've got combat turned off as well, the game won't let me fast travel because there's Supermutants outside. So if you do approach, there's usually an Enclave Eyebot pottering about, but there's also a handful of Supermutants at the outside. So to gain access to Vault 87, you have to visit Little Lamplight, which is the city that's established in these caverns that was a tourist attraction before the war. And essentially what happened was that there was a bunch of kids and their teachers and some of the parents that were chaperoning the field trip that got stuck in the caves when the bombs fell. And they ended up staying there, and all the adults left and left them alone one by one, to the point where the kids then decided that they didn't trust adults anymore, and that's how it became a society of children where they are made to leave once they reach adulthood, which I think seems to be when they're about 16 to 18 years old. It is not very clear. So in this save file I've already completed the quest, so it means that we're kind of free to explore, so we'll head inside. So the original social experiment that was planned for Vault 87 was scrapped in favour of using it as a testing centre for FEV, which is the Forced Evolutionary Virus. I plan to do an in-depth video on that virus and how it all works, or an in-depth series. So we will get on to a lot more details about the FEV and how I think it works and all that kind of stuff. But to gain access to Vault 87, you have to be allowed in here by the kids, by Mayor McCready particularly. And you can do that by being persuasive enough, having the Child at Heart perk, or by completing a quest where you rescue some of the kids from Paradise Falls from the slavers. So a few different ways that you can approach that, but once you do, the kids will let you in here and you can come in and come and go as you like. So yep, there's this one here, which is the computer that you need to hack because nobody knows the password. And then the other way is through what's called Murder Pass, which is where all the mutants are hanging around. So we can go in here. So you'll see right away that the place is in quite a state of disrepair. You know, everything's starting to rust. The mutants are obviously not doing a lot to maintain the vault and the vault systems. But you can see that a lot's kind of gone wrong here. There is a terminal, so this is one of the dwellers who's a technician, Peter Stevens, and his journal is quite interesting. Not all the entries are available, but he is mourning the loss of his son who died, and his wife is in a severe depression because of this, which is understandable. I'll do a biography about this man, but they were dwellers and he's quite concerned. And then he's hearing children when he's down here in the tunnels. He's hearing children's laughter, and the doctors are telling him that he's losing his mind after he lost his son. But as we know, there were children just outside, but he really struggles to cope. But I'll do a full biography on this man, and the story, which is really quite a sad one, and it kind of connects to Little Lamplight. And then you've got this, which goes nowhere basically. It's obviously collapsed in at some point. So Vault 87 did have quite a few kind of ways to access the caves that it was kind of built into, and yeah, a lot of death and destruction. This is it. So this is Murder Pass, which when you come here at first is full of mutants, and if you do too much side questing and become a high level, then you're often going to find super mutant overlords, which are massive bullet sponges, so be warned, there's a lot of mutants here. And they've got windows so you can see the cave outside, and it's just carnage everywhere you look. The red roaches are all dead, and there's a teddy bear, and then massive piles of skeletons. So basically what happened is, after a year after the vault was sealed, the test subjects kind of rebelled, and they escaped their containment and overwhelmed the security force, killing a lot of people. And those that they didn't kill, they then dipped in the FEV and made them into super mutants as well. And eventually what happened is that the super mutants started leaving the vault. They discovered how to get out the vault, and they started going out and collecting humans and bringing them back here to be turned into super mutants as well. And that's the birth of the East Coast Capital Wasteland Supermutants. So this is where they all came from essentially, and you can see that they have made themselves quite at home in this vault. You've got their gore bags and their massive like girders that they've made into kind of defensive things. And yep, there's actually blood dripping from one of the gore bags up there, so it's a lovely little detail. A lot of the doors have been broken off. We've got some kind of testing area or clinic in here. So this was the living quarters, and there is some cut content from this vault, which is basically the overseer's office. You can't actually get into the overseer's office, I believe. Got a protector still running, and yep, super mutants. So I say I've already kind of stormed this place and dealt with all of them. I've got more gore bags. Yeah. So there's really not a whole lot left of, you know, suitable. I'm going to put the pit boy light on actually so we can see better of what's left of the residents of the vault. There's more. Oh wait, this has gone back the way we came down to the reactor level, I think. So yeah, this is where I want to go. So yeah, this is all boarded up, but there's skeletons inside, there's blood and bits of stuff everywhere you look. Oh, there's the bathrooms. And the other bathrooms. And this is us up on the sort of top level of the main kind of atrium, where there's just gore bags everywhere. It's all just a big mess. Okay, up we go. Yeah, so there's sections that are all blocked off. There's bits that have collapsed. There's some radiation here. I believe this was maybe supposed to lead to the overseer's office, but that was taken out. Gore bags, handprints and blood. Somebody's obviously made some attempt at cleaning. And more mutants. And safe. And then medical records. So this is an interesting thing to know. So, all employees must read to all medical record staff, any vault member marked as deceased by the special EEP section. So EEP, they don't tell you what that stands for, but that stands for the Evolution Experimentation Project or Program. So anyone deceased by the special EEP section will be tagged and coded in the computer as an unexplained or undefined death. This comes directly from the overseer of this vault, who will be personally inspecting your reports to make sure they are accurate. Please refrain from sending inquiries or clarification requests to this office or to the EEP chief physician. Please print out and give any next of kin form DV900L if they have questions. So what that means is that there's a special code for anyone that died as a result of the experimentations that were going on. So we'll look at the death code definitions first of all. So the following are the new revised death code definitions. Please update all files to include these codes for faster handling. Note that criminal deaths/suicides are never listed in these files as such. They must be listed under a code A008 and accidental deaths as per Vault Tech mandate. So anyone that has been either murdered or taken their own life are marked as accidental deaths. So that's one thing. And then anybody that died as a result of the experimentation that was going on in this vault was marked as an unknown, undefined. So here's a list of codes. So natural deaths would be microbial agents, so infections, radiation, radioactive agents, toxic agents, allergic reactions, heart disease, ischemic. So ischemic is where there's a lack of blood supply to an organ. So something like a heart attack because of a blockage of one of the coronary arteries in the heart, something like that. So it's all related to kind of circulatory disease and heart disease. Cerebrovascular disease, which would be things like aneurysms in the brain, stuff like that. So cerebral means brain, vascular means the blood vessels, so something like a brain aneurysm, that kind of a thing. Bronchitis, emphysema, asthma, so that's respiratory disease affecting the lungs. Liver disease or cirrhosis. Cancer type 1, cancer type 2 categories. I'm not sure what the difference would be in those, whether it's like the type of cancer and what organs are involved, that kind of thing. And then unexpected organ failure and age, so just dying of old age. So that's the natural causes that they would expect, which is all your kind of medical stuff and disease and illness that you kind of expect with a population of people, that stuff like that's going to happen eventually. Then we're on to the accidental deaths, so massive radiation overexposure, so that's kind of acute radiation sickness, massive toxin overexposure, electrical shock, crushing a heavy object, an elevator mishap, drowning, which I don't know how that would happen in a vault necessarily, mistaken weapons discharge, and A008 is instant death syndrome. So that was the one that like suicides and murders would be listed under as instant death syndrome, which is an interesting choice, because instant death syndrome is the kind of thing where someone just dies suddenly and you don't find a real explanation for why. Then accidental weapons discharge. So interesting choices for classification there. And then UD000, undefined or unexplained, see supervisor. So now that we know all that stuff, we can have a look at some statistics for all the people that have died. So the total deceased is 93. Natural deaths, we've got 4. Accidental deaths, 2. 87 unexplained or undefined. So you can assume that there's 87 people in this list that have died as a result of the experiment with FEV that's been going on in this vault. So you can scroll through these. You've got Marianne, Hansu, A003. So there's one of your natural deaths. You've got N12, another natural death. Wait, I said the other one was an accidental. This one was natural death. And then all the rest of these, there's another one that was an accidental death. Truman West. And then the list just goes on and on and on. There's another natural death, Mercy Acosta. Bennett Faust, natural death. Eve Greenwald, natural death. But the rest of them are all this undefined. So yeah, so it's quite a long list of deceased people for a vault. I'm not sure we know what the intended capacity was, but the kind of standard was sort of 500 to 1,000 people. So the engineering section. So this terminal belongs to a man named Daniel Coster, who is the engineer of the vault's head of engineering. So service entry 2, green code, which means it's not anything major. So dormitory water dispensers outputting water with a foul aftertaste. So there's too much kind of chemical rebalancing added to the water. So should be fine, and it's all kind of sorted. So this is just obviously the kind of maintenance tickets. So red code presumably means more severe. Reactor spikes and power outages. So there's been some problems with the power grid in the vault, and there's power spikes in the main reactor. He thought it was having a major malfunction, but it turns out that it's due to a power draw that the experimental section is creating. So whatever they're doing in there is way over the limit for power consumption. So he's had the backup reactor kick in when it's needed, but they didn't really have any choice because the power drained. So obviously the experiments that they were doing was using up a lot of electricity. And then radiation purging issue in the GECK chamber. So Vault-Tech's crappy handiwork is at it again. I've spent the better part of a month patching and repatching the radiation purge system that vents excess radiation from the GECK chamber. No idea why this system keeps failing. I suspect the system is just inadequate and can't handle the amount of radiation it's purging. So as soon as he can get some parts, he's going to set up a new system. And then apparently the reconstitution for the tapioca pudding was making it bright orange, and it was just being misinterpreted. So it was an easy fix to make sure that the pudding was, you know, the right colour. So that's not really that interesting. This one is a bit more interesting. So this is a EEP chamber failure and code red. So he was summoned to the overseer's office and met with Dr. Merrick, who heads up the experimentation section. He informed me that one of his devices, what he called an EEP chamber, was redacted. It was a strange device, but I managed to something which didn't fix the problem. I then tried something else, which seemed to bring the device back online. Not sure what this device is for, but so his notes about whatever machine it was that he got asked to fix has all been redacted and edited to remove anything that they didn't want people to know about. But the most interesting one is this final entry here. Need help, Daniel Coster. This is the only place I could think of hiding this message. In the event that anyone reads this, please try and get word back to Vault-Tec HQ that something very wrong is going on in the experimentation section, something they keep referring to as the EEP. My wife Mercia was diagnosed by the medical section as having some sort of disease they wouldn't identify. She's dead now, and those sons of bitches won't even tell me why. From talking to people, I've discovered that many are dead or missing. Checking this with the medical records section gets me nowhere. This is getting out of hand. It's time to deal with this my way. They took my wife from me, now I'll take their lives away if I don't get some answers. I've hidden some extra help in my safe. Accessing this message will unlock it. If I don't come back, grab that stuff and save yourself. So when you read that message for the first time, this safe will open and he's left a gun and some ammo and other bits and useful bits and pieces in there for you. So the fact that it's still there means he obviously never managed to come back and get it. But he was angry because his wife was told, he was told that his wife had some kind of illness, and then he was basically not told anything else and sent away, and he was quite angry about that fact. And he thinks that they used his wife as one of their experiments. So I'm going to return back here to where the medical records were. So let's get into that. So if we look at the deceased listing, we'll have to scroll through it a bit until we find her. There she is. So Mercia Coster, death number 33, code N009. So N009, so remember that. And then if we look at the death code definitions, N009 is type 1 category of cancer. So according to the medical records, it was cancer that she died of, and they didn't use the code for the deaths that are related to the experiment with the FEV that was going on. So he's angry that his wife died, which is a natural reaction, and part of grief is to be angry. So, you know, it's understandable. But he's accusing Vault-Tec of killing his wife, and actually they didn't. She died of cancer, although possibly it was contributed with the issues with the radiation being vented and things. You know, we've talked about that before, that radiation can increase the risk of cancer and that kind of a thing. So it's entirely possible that that's partly the reason why. But she wasn't involved in the experiment. She wasn't a test subject. She died of natural causes, in quotation marks. So, you know, that's a lot of people that have died due to the experiments that were taking place in this vault. That's us back onto the other side of where we were, but this bit's all blocked off, so the only way to go is upstairs. There's more skeletons and bits, and then this takes us into the testing labs. So obviously this is where the experiments were all taking place, and a lot of things is just poorly maintained. There's a centaur, so these were kind of mutated to be like dogs or something, but yeah, they're terrifying. And then here's an interesting one. So there's radiation around in here as well. This is one of the failed early test subjects where the muscle mass was massive. So you've got these massive like growth of muscle, and hypertrophy is the kind of term where muscle mass grows massively, and sort of tumours, and you know, clearly this person died in a lot of pain. It's just been left here. So, you know, the first experiments really didn't go well for a lot of the subjects. I don't know if this tells us anything. So yeah, chamber's offline, but if we look at the FEV reserves, tanks are depleted. So this is the problem that these supermutants are facing in 2277. They are not able to reproduce in the normal way. They are asexual, they don't have any reproductive organs because of the mutation, so the only way to make more supermutants is to capture humans, bring them here and dip them in the FEV, and the problem with that is that they've run out, so the FEV reserves have depleted, there's nothing left. So that's the reason that when you're exploring the wasteland, you'll come across a few locations where there's supermutants that you think might be a bit odd for them to be there, such as the Museum of Technology, which is where you would go when you're getting the dish for 3 for the radio. You have Our Lady of Hope Hospital, which is where you can go to help Riley's Rangers, and they're dealing with a massive supermutant incursion there. Or you find them in Vault-Tec headquarters because they think maybe if we find more vaults, we might find more FEV. And you can in here at one point, if you're sneaky enough, you can overhear them talking about it and talking about how they're looking for the green stuff, because they don't know how to make it. They don't really know exactly where it comes from, so they're just trying their best to find it so that they can keep their population going. But unfortunately, because instead of kind of taking advice and things from a more intelligent supermutant like Fox, who you meet in this vault, who's a bit more intelligent than the average, because of that they've ostracized him, so they don't have any kind of guidance to help them figure out this situation. So they're doing the best they can with what they know, which is that FEV comes from vaults, or maybe it comes from hospitals. They don't really know, and they're doing their best to kind of rectify it. So in a way it's kind of a shame for them, but you know, the problem is that they are very dangerous. The kids of Little Lamplight have set up a proper barricade, and they've trained themselves to use weapons so that they can defend themselves against the mutants. So let's have a look at the Chief Physician's terminal. So this is Dr. Wayne Merrick's terminal, and he is the chief physician and in charge of the FEV research. So entry 873490. I don't know if these have just been numbered, but the latest subjects in the EEP program are showing some promise after only a single exposure to the modified FEV. We're currently testing 5 subjects, 2 males and 3 females. Each one of them is under 24-hour observation as usual. We hope to have a breakthrough in this strain as the continual pressure from Vault-Tec and the military at Mariposa is becoming most bothersome. So if you know your Fallout history from the first game, the main location where they were testing the FEV was at the Mariposa military base over on the west coast, and it does seem that this guy's actually getting in touch with them, with the military at Mariposa and with Vault-Tec. So he's kind of hearing from them, and it's, as far as I know, they end up using, here they use a different strain of the FEV compared to the one that the Master uses in the original Fallout game, so that's why the mutants are a bit different. But yeah, so he seems to be in contact with them, which is interesting because there's not really a lot of like cross-country communication happening in the Fallout universe after the bombs, so that's quite interesting. And then next entry, incredible results after only 3 days. Subjects B440, B164 and D624, all are female specimens, are all exhibiting a unique change. Their bodies are undergoing severe physical changes, losing most of their visible female indicators and transforming to an almost asexual state. They're also seeing increased upper body strength and muscle formation in line with males. So that's one of the kind of things that they've noticed, is that the women are basically losing their secondary sexual characteristics, and showing muscle mass increase as well. And then the male specimens are actually doing the same thing and taking on the same kind of state. So it seems that the FEV wishes to level the playing field and start with a clean slate as it works. So it's changing both genders, or well, both sexes, to be have no sexual organs, no kind of sexual characteristics, and that then becomes the problem, because that means that the supermutants can't reproduce in the old-fashioned way. However, there's been a bit of a setback. Mary Kilpatrick has died. According to the autopsy, she died of massive loss of brain function and was unable to sustain her basic bodily needs. This is the usual pattern we see in all the FEV strains we test. The brains of the subjects becoming too damaged to support even most basic human needs. So far, all other subjects are nominal and continue to exhibit physical changes. So one of the test subjects has died because the brain function was damaged too much. So that's obviously a bit of a problem. And then 10 days, we're noticing that the skin of all the remaining test subjects is actually thickening and becoming more resilient. Seems to be the FEV bringing about some new adaptive change. This is the kind of result we were looking for. Adaptations that could prove useful in combat situations. I need to remember to congratulate Dr. Philo on his skin engineering. His coded instructions in this strain seem to be exactly what he expected. So what you can take from that is that there's obviously some changes, that the skin on the subjects is getting tougher and thicker, which means that they can tank more bullets and things on the battlefield. And it seems that another scientist has put specific sort of genes into the virus to cause this effect. So, you know, it's kind of, they're using the virus to reprogram the human genome, essentially, which is what you mean by forced evolutionary virus, because normal evolution happens over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's not something that happens in a generation or two. It takes many, many generations for it to really kind of show any changes. But this virus is kind of pushing that to make it happen faster, essentially. That's kind of the definition. And then we've hit the damn wall at 14 days. All the subjects began to exhibit severe bouts of rage and anxiety, and they were becoming dangerous to the scientists. So they had to be destroyed. This will be why there's a massive list of 87 people that were killed by these experiments, probably. And it pains me every time we do this. It's the same cycle. We see superior physical adaptations, but the mental changes are their downfall. And again, if you go back to Fallout 1, the Master says the exact same thing. In one of his journal entries, he says, yeah, most of them just can't mutate correctly. They become nothing but big dumb brutes. So it's not unexpected. And then you can come in here, we've got a bunch of guys. There's a Raider and some Wastelanders that have been brought here. More isolation rooms, and there's some flammable gas in here, so be careful. And there's another centaur. So a lot of the rooms do have centaurs and sometimes people. There's one where there's a guy who, I think this is him, yes, Sid. So he is locked in this room when you get here, but if you open the door and let him out, he turns hostile and attacks you. Unfortunately, there's no reasoning with him. And then we get down here, there's more supermutants, and the reactor's not doing too well. So this is what you do to let Fox out, essentially. So it's the emergency release. You can hack into the terminal, or you can use this a couple of different ways, but that's basically to allow you to open the doors to all these isolation rooms where subjects were locked away. The most important one being over here, which is, this is where Fox was. So Fox is a supermutant who has managed to retain his intelligence, and because of that, the supermutants, the others, didn't really understand him, so they kind of left him locked in here, and he's never actually left this room that he can remember anyway, which is a shame. And they've kind of ostracized him because he's intelligent, so they just don't really understand how he's thinking, which is kind of a shame. But yeah, this is where Fox would be, and then what he does is he'll come and help you retrieve the GECK. So just more of this kind of thing, and then you have to make your way through here. where everything's just broken down and there's more mutants everywhere. And then we get to here, and this actually is the door that leads to the external door, which you can't use, but the Enclave somehow are able to get in, because when you complete the quest and you get the gate, you come back through here and they drop a stun grenade and then they take you to Raven Rock, but they seem to have come in through the external door somehow. But we follow this path around, and there's a storage room here which is useful because it does contain, I think there's, no it's not in here but I might have picked up, but there's radiation stuff in here, radiation drugs and things which I probably already collected when I did the quest. And then we come into this room, so again there's super mutants everywhere, so you end up fighting quite a lot of them, and there's some more warm and glow of radiation. But we have another terminal here which is the lab technician's terminal. So you can use this to unlock that storage room that we were just in, and then there's a few notices to read. So, attention all lab technicians, the A-level storage room has been restocked with rad suits and other radiation dampeners. We were able to bring these up from deep storage for immediate use. Please only take what is needed. There is no need to hoard the items, there's plenty to go around, and to lock the door after you're finished. And then the radiation expulsion ducts from the GECK chamber are once again venting radiation directly into the area due to faulty seals. These seals must be properly maintained and checked on a daily basis. There's a clipboard with the maintenance checklist that you must initial when the check is complete in the main laboratory. Any lab technician skipping their check will be held accountable for their inaction. So it's another thing, and that's probably something that's had a bit of an impact on the way the FEVs worked on people, is that there is some radiation leaking. So from the GECK, where the GECK is stored, the radiation's leaking and it's kind of getting into the sort of ventilation system and things. So they're supposed to be checking the seals and making sure that they're not leaking. And then another notice. So Dr. Merrick has ordered the latest test subjects in the EEP to be terminated and then disposed of. Please make sure that bodily remains are placed in the incinerator as soon as the subject's vitals are flat. The entire isolation room is disinfected and any relevant data on the subjects are given to Dr. Merrick. FEV is very unpredictable and we do not want any contamination to remain when the next strain is introduced to new subjects. So all the kind of lab technicians and things, they obviously knew what was going on. So this is sort of saying that we need to make sure that everything's been fully disinfected and the subjects after they die are incinerated so that they're only exposed to the new experimental strains. So obviously what's happening is there's a cycle where they keep changing the strain of the FEV, so they're altering it, potentially altering its DNA or its RNA in order to try and perfect it essentially. So each time they go through a cycle it's a slightly different strain, so they don't want any cross-contamination. And it's all discussed very clinically, considering that this is literal people's lives that we're talking about, but you know, that is Vault-Tec for you. And then there's another view of the radiated tunnel. This is obviously like a sort of server room of some kind. And then we can make... Oh, I just tripped over an assault rifle, as you do. But yeah, you can make your way through here. And say this part, when you're going through here, at least the Fox helps you fight off the mutants. But again, you can see gore bags. And there's another Supermutant. And then we get to this section here, which is the chamber terminal. So you can do radiation purge, which doesn't work. And you can seal the radiation chamber. So you can go and get the GECK yourself if you want, but if you look in the top right corner again, it's not an easy thing to do, and Fox actually gets really annoyed with you if you just go and do it. And there's really no reason not to let Fox get it for you, because as you'll see, we'll go through here, there's nothing in here but radioactive goop. There's, you know, there's only the one room, which is here, and this is where the GECK was kept. So you can do it yourself, but there's no loot, there's nothing, there's no reason for you to come in here and expose yourself to these crazy amounts of radiation. But yeah, so the GECK, as we know, is the Garden of Eden creation kit, and it's a terraforming device invented by Dr. Braun. So if you don't know what terraforming means, terraforming is essentially a term for altering the structure of land or a planet, essentially, to make it suitable for life. So the idea behind the GECK is in the case of, you know, nuclear war and nuclear devastation, that the GECK could then be triggered and it would create a brand new fertile land once again. So yeah, it would basically then reshape the land in order to make it a nice fertile landscape where plants could grow and life could carry on, and everything will be all sunshine and roses. So, you know, it's kind of an interesting thing, and it's a very, very interesting thing to give to this location. So then obviously you would make your way back through here, and the Enclave will come and take you away in the main quest. But it's obviously, this vault has become one of the most problematic for the Wasteland, because it's the source of the Supermutants of the Capital Wasteland, and they do have a few things different to them compared to the West Coast Supermutants that were created by the Master. So that's something to kind of bear in mind. But yeah, and you've got these are the kind of isolation rooms, and if you look at the terminals on these, you can identify the specimen. You can open the door or you can terminate them, which basically blasts them with fire that kills them instantly. So I think those people might already have been dead, but there's a couple of them here that have got centaurs, so it's an easy way to deal with the centaurs without you having any risk to yourself, which is nice. But yeah, I think we've covered pretty much everything. I say you can't get into the Overseer's office. That was originally going to be a thing, but for some reason they took it out. So you have, that's pretty much all the detail, but I'll take a wee look at the sort of cut content terminal entries because I think they're quite interesting. And these would be the kind of journal from the Overseer of this vault. And I say I'm pretty sure this path was intended to lead to the Overseer's office. If you look at the local map, yeah, that would make sense really for it to be something like that, but they obviously took it out of the game. So this is the cut content of the Overseer's terminal entries that had been removed from the game, but I think they're quite interesting to talk about. So the first one is a security dossier about Dr. Wayne Merrick, who was the chief physician and in charge of the research that was done here. I'm told that Dr. Merrick is one of the brightest minds in the field of accelerated evolution, and apparently Vault-Tec agrees because they've set up this vault around him to suit all of his needs in the event that the bombs fall. All of his data and his work have been transferred to this facility from many important sources such as Mariposa Base, West-Tec and Vault-Tec Labs. I like Dr. Merrick. He's driven without being careless. He knows that in the event of a nuclear war, he may be the only person left in the world that can advance human genetics beyond where they are now. He's meticulous, detail-oriented, and reports everything to me on a regular basis. So clearly the Overseer kind of liked this guy. Then the next one that's relevant, that's available, is Daniel Coster. So Daniel Coster, an excellent maintenance chief, thorough, careful and honest to a fault. In fact, that's becoming a problem. His security clearance isn't high enough yet to grant him access to all the information regarding the FEV experiments performed by Dr. Merrick, but we may have to bring him into the fold soon. In the event we need major repairs on A-level, we'll definitely need his skills. So Daniel wasn't aware of the experiments going on, and he was then brought into it, and as we saw, he did find out what was going on. And then Peter Stevens, which is the terminal that we saw when we entered from Little Lamplight, and he was one of the technicians. So this gentleman continues to impress me. He was just recently promoted to Technician 3rd Class by Chief Coster for his ingenuity and ability to think quickly in emergencies. Given these talents, I think he'd make an excellent candidate for Coster's eventual successor if the need should ever arise. Update. It seems Peter has suffered some sort of a nervous breakdown. He keeps claiming that his son is missing and his wife is in deep depression, although I show no records of him ever being married or having a child. I've recommended he be taken to the test labs for observation and sedation if need be. So this gives some interesting context to Peter Stevens' records, where he's talking about his son Jason that died and his wife being depressed, that this was all some sort of hallucination and none of this actually happened. So obviously this is cut content, so it's not canon, so we don't really know the actual truth either way, but it's an interesting kind of new perspective on that situation. So that's mostly the details. And then the only other things that were kind of cut out was there's a scouting report, mission suspended. I'm quite sad to report that due to a direct hit from what I presume to be a nuclear weapon on the entry area of Vault 87, we will be unable to provide the scouting reports as outlined in Vault Tech's operations manual. The main door to Vault 87 is damaged beyond repair, and we are detecting extremely high levels of lethal radiation outside and in the entry tunnels. So this again was confirmation that the reason that you have to go through a little lamplight to get into Vault 87 is because the door took a direct hit and is extremely radioactive and dangerous to go that way. But again, cut content, so it's, but obviously the evidence that it's irradiated and logged is still there. But that would have kind of explained that situation as well. So I don't know why this was all removed from the game, but that's some additional context to some of the stuff that happened in this vault, so I thought it'd be quite interesting to include that. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of tragedy around this vault. There's a lot of kind of horrible things that have happened, and the experiments in creating the Supermutants, who are just a real problem for the entire wasteland at this point, because they are just forever out searching for more FEV and more humans to dip into the FEV to make more Supermutants, and that's their entire purpose. And it's done a lot of damage, and this place is falling apart because of it. They're not maintaining it properly, and the few intelligent Supermutants that could have helped them, unfortunately, they have ostracised them, unlike in Fallout 1, where the Master was in charge and he was intelligent, and he had a few intelligent Supermutants that kind of were in charge of managing things that he couldn't be involved with. Like, say, Marcus, who you also meet in Fallout New Vegas, and I think he was a companion in Fallout 2. But there's obviously a lot of death happened in this vault, a lot of horrible things, and of all the kind of experiments and all the things that have been created, the FEV is one of the worst because of how damaging it is to everything. Creating these monsters essentially, and that they've just reverted to a much more primal kind of form of humanity, because they are just killing people and kidnapping people and turning them into mutants and things. But at the same time, it's kind of, they're fighting against the same issue that the Master didn't really kind of catch on to, is that because Supermutants can't reproduce, in any way that they can only turn humans into mutants, and that means that they need to have access to FEV. So they are on a path to extinction, essentially, and that's something that is a problem. If they were supposed to be, you know, the whole idea around the Unity was that this was a new, better version of humanity to cope with the post-apocalyptic wasteland and that kind of a thing. But eventually, if they were to manage to convert every single human being left in America into a super mutant, then eventually the whole species is going to die out because they've no way of kind of reproducing after that. And eventually, you know, especially with some of the nasty wildlife wandering the wasteland, like the death claws and things, that eventually they would all die off in some fashion. And that would be the end of things. So it's, yeah, I mean, this is obviously a very central vault to the plot of Fallout 3, because you need the GECK in order to get the water purifier working. But there's also quite a few tragic stories. So Daniel Coster, who obviously lost his wife and blamed Vault-Tec, blamed the overseer, and made plans to do something about it. We don't really know what happened to him. I mean, he didn't come back to get his weapons and things, so one would assume that he maybe tried to do something and then the security took him out or something like that. We don't really know. And then there's Peter Stevens here, who's one of the technicians, and his kind of descent into just extreme grief and feeling trapped in this vault is really quite sad. And I say I'll talk about his story in more detail in the biographies. That might be the one to do next week, actually, on Tuesday. We can talk about Peter Stevens and how his problems kind of had a big impact on Little Lamplight, and is mainly the reason why Little Lamplight is what it is. So a lot of interesting stuff around here, and a lot of interesting little stories in the background. There's some very sad stories, but you know, as always, as we've seen time and again in this series about the vaults, is that vast majority of them do end up just being a complete and utter horror show. Don't really expect anything less from Vault-Tec at this point. So yeah, hopefully you find that all very interesting. I say it's definitely that from this video there's a few other things that I do want to cover. I say the story of Peter Stevens and Little Lamplight I think is really, really interesting, and about talking about FEV, so that's a video that's going to take a bit of time to put together, right enough. But I do want to do a really in-depth video of looking at FEV and what we know about it from the games and the kind of canon of Fallout, and also about how realistic it is that we could have a virus that could do stuff like this. Obviously not something that really exists that we know of anyway, but is it something that's possible? Because that's always the thing about science fiction, is that a lot of the time science fiction does end up going on to become science fact, but there's maybe some things that shouldn't exist because of ethical or morality reasons. I don't know. But hopefully you enjoyed all that and found it quite interesting. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the East Coast mutants versus the West Coast mutants, and about the kind of story of Vault 87 and what the Vault-Tec were up to, and what you think about it. I'd love to hear in the comments, and if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.